Masechet Ketubot Daf Sadi Gimel. We start with a very exciting Mishnah that has been the subject of a mathematical puzzle for generations, and we'll see if we can resolve it. Mishahaya Nasui Shalosh Nashim Umet. A man was married to 3 women, and he died in the lifetime of all these 3 wives, and so now his estate has to pay out the 3 ketubas. However, here's the complication: ketubata shel zo maneh, v'shel zo matayim, v'shel zo shelosh meot, ve'en sham ela maneh cholkin b'shaveh. So he owes to the first woman 100, to the second 200, to the third 300. We have to be talking about a case where he actually wrote all 3 ketubot on the same day at the same time, because otherwise, if he wrote one earlier and then married the second one some days later, then the first one has the first lien, the earliest lien on the land, would get paid first in total before the second one does. But if they do all have their ketubah written at the same time, so they all have an equal access to the lien. However, if there's only 100 zuz in his estate altogether, so certainly not enough to pay all of them, well, in that case, they divide it equally. Everybody gets 1/3. Here's a quick chart. So the case is, we'll call them Sarah deserves 100. Rivka has 200 coming to her. Rachel has 300 written in her ketubah. If there's only 100 in the entire estate, then they divide equally. The reason why they would divide equally and not proportionally or some other way, the idea is that they have an equal lien on that piece of land. Sarah has a lien on the entire amount of land, because the entire amount of land is 100, and she has a lien of 100. So since they all have an equal lien on that little piece of land, so they all get paid 33 1/4 equally. All right, let's see that makes sense. Let's see the next case, and here's where it's going to get a little more complicated. Hayusham matayim. So the estate has 200 in zuz. Shel maneh notelet chamishim, shel matayim, v'shel shelosh meot, shelosha shel zahav. A zahav, a golden dinar, is worth 25 zuz. So 3 zahav is 75. So the one that was deserving 100 gets 50, and the other 2 women, both the one that is owed 200 and the one that's owed 300, gets 75 each. So here's the chart for that. It's 50, 75, and 75. Now, this is hard to understand because based on the principle we saw over here about land lien, the first one has a lien only of 100, and they all do, so technically she should get 33. And then Rivka, the second one, has a lien on all of the remaining land, because there's only 200 remaining. And so since she has a lien on all of it, then it should be that the first one gets 33, and they each get 33 from the first 100 of the land, and then the second 100 should be split evenly, so that it would be 33, and this would be 83 and 83. That's what we would expect. This is strange. Why does this one get 50? And 75 and 75. Very difficult to explain this. The Gemara is going to propose a couple of solutions that are going to be forced okimtot. That will be difficult to fit into the words of the Mishnah. And the Geonim and Rishonim offer all kinds of possibilities. Before I give an explanation, let's see the third case. Hayu sham shelosh meot shel maneh notelet chamishim. V'shel matayim maneh, v'shel shelosh meot shisha shel zahav. If there are 300 zuz in the estate altogether to pay everyone, so not enough, you need 600 for everyone to get paid in full. So this is half the amount that's necessary. The one that was owed 100 gets 50, like she did in the second case. The one who's owed 100. The one who's owed 200 rather gets 100, and the one who's owed 300 gets 6 zahav, meaning 6 times 25, which is 150. As follows here, it's 50, 100, 150. This is also difficult to understand based on the principle of a lien. So really, the one that is owed 100 has a lien only on 100 of the property, should only get 33. So this all three have an equal lien on the first 100, so they each get 33. Rivka, the second one, has a lien on the second 100 along with the Rachel, so they should actually split the second 100 evenly, and so she would get 33 plus 50 is the 83. And Rachel is the only one that has a lien on the third 100 of the property, so should get that exclusively and get 183. But that's not the case here. So it's really difficult to figure out what is the principle behind this. It seems like in the case of when there's only 100, the solution is to split everything evenly. Okay, fine, but then if you want to be consistent, so that do that throughout. And in the end, this one they should each get 100, but we don't do that. Another possibility is this should always be proportional. That there should always be, since all this adds up to 600, so Sarah would get 1/6, Rivka would get 2/6, and Rachel would always get 3/6, or a half of whatever's there. And the proportional is what happens in the third case here, where Sarah gets half. She's owed 100, she gets half. Rivka's owed 200, she gets half. Rachel's owed 300, she gets half. So that is also something that you could, would be fair, and you could do in all cases. But that only works for this case. It doesn't work for the case for the middle case. Middle case is actually quite difficult to understand. What is the principle behind it? All right, the Talmud is going to, as I said, propose two forced okimtot, but here is an answer. It was discovered by Professor Robert Oman. Here he is receiving a Nobel Prize in Economics. He is still a professor of mathematics at Hebrew University. He made a tremendous Kiddush Hashem here, accepting his award with a kippah on, has made a tremendous contribution to many fields, and he turns his attention to this particular sugya and wrote a paper on it. He's a world expert not only in knot theory, but also in game theory. And so he analyzed this using very sophisticated models of game theory, but the solution he came to is actually quite simple and can be explained simply, even though he had to use some complex mathematics to figure it out. So here is the model that he has published. If you imagine three hourglass-shaped tubes, this one represents the one who was owed 100, but we split it in half. 50 up here and 50 down here. And then next to it is the one that is owed 200, split in half, 100 up here, 100 down here. And this altogether is 300, but also split in half, 150 and 150. These hourglasses are all connected on the bottom such that their level will always even out based on basic principle of hydraulics. The amount inside these small tubes is negligible. So if we start filling it up, and let's say we have 100 to fill all three up with, well, they will all settle down to just 33 each. So that would be the first case here. If we add a little more, if we add 200, then you see that this one will fill up till 50. Here's the case of 200. The first one will fill up till 50, and then it will not fill up anymore until it gets all the way up here. That'll be in a while. And so this one fills up till 50, and then the leftover will be evenly distributed between these two. So 200 minus 50 leaves 150. That's 75 and 75 each. In the case where there is 300 altogether, we pour another 100 into this, and then this one gets a full half, which is 50. This one gets a full half of what she's owed, which is 100, and that's 150 altogether, leaving 150 so that she is also full. The basic principle is that everyone gets an even distribution until they get a half of what they are owed. So everybody should get up to even until they get up to a half. What the Mishnah does not discuss is what happens if there's more than half. How will that be distributed? Mishnah says nothing about it, and therefore we can only guess what the Mishnah would say. But Oman's proposal is that once you reach half, then any more of that will go to the one that's owed the most, the 150, so that no one, just like as here, it should be split evenly until everyone has been restored at least half. So too, on the opposite side, we turn it around and say the one that's missing the most should be restored first until her loss is equal to the second most, and they are both restored until their losses are equal, and if there's still more after that, then they share equally until they are all full. And so this is a pretty simple, straightforward model that can be applied in all possible cases, and you can even multiply this if there are 4 or 10 or 100 people that are owed all kinds of different amounts. It's simple to make this calculation and figure it out. He wrote a relatively complex article using lots of mathematical notation and proving all the game theory behind it. So it's quite fascinating that this is a Mishnah that assumed quite an interesting solution, but it was so complex and maybe beyond its time that the Talmud, Geonim, Rishonim did not come to a simple explanation that easily can explain all the cases, and it took a professor in our times to figure it out. Actually, you can find something like it in a work called Darka Shel Torah, which was a little bit before Oman, but nevertheless, it did take a long time to figure this out. All right, so this is really fascinating, the way you can find advanced game theory even in the Mishnah, but now we'll see what the Talmud has to say about it and how it explains it. Okay, one more point in the Mishnah. V'chen shelosha she'tilu lakis pichatu or hotiru kachen holkin. This principle of distribution applies not only to paying out of a ketubah, where there's a lien and all that, but also to 3 people who deposited money into a purse. We would call it a partnership or a corporation. And each one puts in a different amount, 100, 200, and 300, into this corporation. And the corporation does business, and now they want to take out the profit, or they have to share the loss. How will they share the loss or the profit? It's based on the same principle as in the Mishnah. Okay, Gemara. Shel maneh notelet chamishim. We have a question about the second case here, where the one that is owed 100 gets 50. Why? She should really get only 33 and a third, based on the fact that she has a lien only on 100. And they all share that lien on 100, so that first 100, they should all share 33. The second 100, that's in this case, the Sarah has no lien on it, so she shouldn't get any part of it. So based on that principle, how can we explain the fact that she gets 50? And here's the first answer. Amar Shemuel, Bechotevet ba'alat 200 lebat maneh, dinu dvarim en li imach bemaneh. The one who's owed 200 tells or writes to the one that says 100, says, I will have no legal dealings with you regarding your 100. In other words, I'm not going to take you to court regarding that, and it's okay. You can keep your share of that first 100. So that here in this case, that first 100 is legally disputed only by Sarah and Rachel, because Rivka says, I'm out, right? It's okay. I'm not going to take my share of 100. And so since that first 100 only has 2 claimants to it, Sarah and Rachel, they split it evenly. So Sarah will get 50, and then Rachel will get 50. But then, Ihachi emasefa, shel 200 v'shel 300 shel zahav. Tema la hasalkat nafshach mina. So we have a question. If so, that she removed herself from the first 100 altogether, then why is it 75 and 75? Really, it should be she gets 50, she gets 50, and then of the second 100, that these 2 will split evenly, so that really Rachel should get 100 and Rivka only 50, right? Because Rachel can tell Rivka, hey, you you removed yourself from the first 100, so it should be 50, 50, 100, if in fact Rivka removed her claim from the first 100. So that's the question, and the answer is Mishum Damrala Midinu Devarim Hu Deseliki Nafshai. Says, no, I only meant that I removed myself from legal dealings or involvement with the first, with Sarah. I didn't mean that I removed my claim regarding the first 100 altogether. So, therefore, it's a kind of combination compromise. Rivka says, listen, I'm not going to make any claim against you regarding that first 100. So, fine. Then there's only Sarah and Rachel regarding the first 100. She gets 50. However, Rivka did not excuse herself of having legal dealings with Rachel, even over the first 100. And so they together have to share the other 50. Sarah gets 50 because she has dealings, a fight only with Rachel, so 50. That leaves another 50, but Rivka says, I want half of the rest of it. So they get 25 each from the first 100. And then the second 100, they split it evenly, 50-50, because they have an equal lien on it, and that's how you get 275. Okay, so this does explain the case, but it does assume in Okimta that Rivka told Sarah that, I'm not going to have a legal dealing with you. It doesn't say that in the Mishnah. All right. Now, the next case. Hayusham shelosh me'ot. If there's 300, so now we ask, shel matayim maneh? Shivim v'chamisha hu de'it la. Shmuel, according to your principle, in the third case, the second woman should only get 75. Here's why. When there's 300 altogether. Now, regarding the first 100, once again, as Shmuel said, Rivka says, I have no dealings with you, Sarah, so I'm not going to claim your 50. Fine, so therefore there's only two claimants to the first 100. Sarah gets half, that 50. The other 50, Rivka says, I do have a claim against Rachel, so that would be 25 each from the first 100. So 50, 25, 25. Now it comes to the second 100. The second 100, Rivka and Rachel have an equal lien on it, so it's split halfway. So she gets 50 and 50, so Rivka has 25 plus 50, that's 75 altogether. Rachel has a sole claim to the third 100. Her lien is 300, only she has a lien on the third 100, so she gets she should get 175 rather than 150, and she should only get 75 rather than 100. So, sorry, Shemuel, your principle that you said, your ukimta that you said to explain the second case, does not work for the third case. Shemuel will answer, Amar Shemuel, bekotevet balat shelosh meot lebalat matayim ul balat maneh din udvarim en li imachem bemaneh. Shemuel makes that a further ukimta, that the third case is talking about where the one who's owed 100 tells the other two women, I have no dealings with either of you. And therefore, let's figure this out. Regarding the first 100, Rachel says, I'm out. I don't want to have any dealings with you. So that will be split 50-50. So that counts for this 50, and Rivka so far gets 50. Regarding the second 100, there they will be split evenly, and so between Rivka and Rachel, in other words, Rachel just says, I have no dealings regarding the first 100 with both of you, but for the second 100, they split it half-half, so Rivka gets half, that's another 50, plus her 50 she had already, that's 100, and she gets 50. The last 100 is all Rachel's, so that adds 100 to the 50 she had already. So there you go. So the third case is not where Rivka told Sarah, I have no dealings with you, but rather Rachel is told the other two, I have no dealings with both of you regarding the first 100. Okay, so yes, it works, but you have to give such particular ukimta in each case that it really would be hard to expand this to further cases, but that is the explanation of Shemuel. Second explanation of the Mishnah now. Rav Yaakov min Nehar Pekod, here's Nehar Pekod. in Bavel, Mishmed Ravina Amar, Resha bishte tefisot, vesefa bishte tefisot. Oh, we're talking about here in the first clauses where there were two seizures of property, meaning that when the husband died, he had property scattered around and they didn't know where it was. So first they figured out where one piece of land is, and so they split that somehow, and then they got a second property come in and they split that as well. Okay, so let's see how this applies. Resha bishte tefisot. This is when it says resha, we're talking about the second case where there's 200 available, but it comes in two waves. De naflu shiv'in v'chamisha bechad zimna. First, they get 75. So 75, they split it equally because they're all owed more than 25. So they split that three ways. They each get 25. And then they get a wave of 125. Now, for that 125, we make a figure of how much each of the three is out. Remember, they all split 25 equally, so 75 equally, so all that already got 25. That means Sarah here is still missing 75. So that 75 that she is missing and that they're all missing, they take that 75 and split it equally. So everyone gets another distribution of 25. So now they all have 50 each. There was 125 altogether in the second distribution, of which they just took 75 and split evenly. That leaves 50. So the 50 Sarah has no claim to because she already made the claim of 75, which they split equally. So the other 50 Rivka and Rachel have an equal claim to, and they split it equally, leaving an extra 25 for each. That's how you get 75 for them and only 50 for this one. So if you assume that two distributions, then that would be fair. And the same thing with the third case, Sefa bishte tefisot. תנפלו 75 בחד זמנה, ו-225 בחד זמנה. In the third case where there's 300 altogether in the estate, but they don't get it all at once. First, they find a field that's worth 75, and so they all the least one has a claim of 100. So that 75 they all have an equal claim to, so they split it three ways, 75 each. Now the rest, which comes later, is 225. So let's see what happens with that. Of that 225, Sarah has only a claim of 75 of it. She already got 25, so only 75 of it. So they all three have an equal claim to 75 of it. So they split that evenly. Fine. So now they all have 50. Now, of the 225 that came originally in the second wave, Rivka had a claim to it, was missing only 175. She got 25 in the first payout, and so she's missing 175. So of the 225, she has a claim only over 175 of it. And therefore, that 175, she will split evenly with Rachel, except that 75 of the 175 already of the second wave was already paid out, and so that leaves 100 of what Rivka can possibly claim. So that 100 is split evenly. Rivka gets 50 and Rachel gets 50. That leaves Rivka with 100 from the first payout. 25 from the first payout, 25 from the 75 that they shared equally, and now 50 from the end, and that leaves a leftover of 150, of another 50 for Rachel, which she gets in total. And so that's how you get 50, 100, and 150. Okay, once again, yes, we can explain it by saying it comes in two waves and applying these principles. But again, this is another okimta that is not said in the Mishnah, and also we'd have to figure out on a case-by-case basis if the numbers were different. It would not be clear. I'm not clear why the Mishnah is not simply teaching us a straightforward case when it all comes at once. Okay, Tanya, Zo Mishnat Rabbi Natan. Rabbi Omer, En ani ro'eh devarav shel Rabbi Natan be'elu ela cholkot b'shaveh. An amazing baraita that says our Mishnah is the minority opinion of Rabbi Natan and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who we usually think is the author of the Mishnah, and very well may be, but not in this case. Rabbi says, I do not agree with Rabbi Natan. On these cases, rather, the Rabbi Yehuda Nasi himself thinks that in all the cases they should divide equally. So even if there's 300, they each get 100. If there's more, then that's it. I mean, the one Sarah would be paid in full. She wouldn't get any more of that. They'd split the rest again equally. So the Rabbi has a simple solution: always divide it equally, and does not understand or does not agree with Rabbi Natan. Okay, so that's the end of that discussion. Now, the end of the Mishnah, which said, V'chen shelosha shehitilu, the principles of division we just said, according to the Binatan, will also apply to 3 investors in a business. Okay, good. But not everybody agrees with the Mishnah. Amar Shemuel, Shenaim shehitilu lakis, ze maneh, veze matayim, hasachar la emsa. Shemuel says that if you have 2 people that are going into business together, and one puts in 100, one puts in 200, they divide equally, like Cholkot B'Shaveh. It could be that Shemuel is following Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi here and not Rabbi Natan. So they divide equally, even though they put in different amounts. All right, it's a little hard to understand. If they put in different amounts, how come they don't get proportional amount back? So Amar Rabba, Mistabra milete dishmoel beshor lacharisha ve'omed lacharisha. Rabbi said, I can understand Shemuel's principle in a case where they bought together an ox for plowing, which was actually used for plowing. The reason is because they're buying one item, and the guy who put in 200, let's say that the ox's cost 300. The guy who put in 200 wouldn't be able to buy the ox without the one who put in 100. And vice versa. In other words, they need each other equally. Each one by himself couldn't do anything. Since they're buying one item, one expensive item, so they get an equal share back, even though they put in different amounts, because they need each other equally. But let's say they instead bought some socks, and they could buy 1,000 socks. And so therefore, the more money you put in, the more merchandise you can buy and profit off of. In that case, then they can get a proportional amount of profit. And so Rabbah said it would make sense only if they buy one big thing and use it for plowing, use it for its work. Let's say they buy an ox for plowing, but in the end they say, you know what, this ox, look, it got fatter, the price of meat went up, it will be better off if we slaughter it. In that case, in that case they divide it proportionally, because now that this ox is slaughtered and butchered, so the bigger the ox, the more that they would get. And so because it's split up, the ox is physically split up, they can split the profits, and the one who put in 200 gets back twice as much as the one who got 100. That's Rabbah's explanation of Shemuel. Rav Hamnuna disagrees and says even if they bought it for originally for plowing and ended up butchering it, nevertheless, they split evenly. He says no matter what, they split evenly. They still need each other to buy it in the first place. Challenge to Rabbah. Me'tibe. Shenaim she'etilu lakis. Ze maneh v'ze matayim. Hasachar la'emsa. There's a Tosefta here that says 2 partners, one put in 100, one put in 200, they split evenly. Ma'ila b'shor lacharisha v'omed litvicha u'ptiutal derabah. So Tosefta doesn't say what case it's talking about, but shouldn't it be covering any case, even if they bought it for plowing and end up slaughtering it, and it still should be even? Challenge to Rabbah. Lo beshor lacharisha ve'omed lacharisha. No, Rabbah could say this Tosefta is only talking about a case where they bought it for plowing and used it for plowing. That's why they split evenly. Okay. Aval shor lacharisha ve'omed letvicha mai ze notel lefi me'otav ve'ze notel lefi me'otav. Okay, but according to Rabbah, if in fact they bought it for plowing and ended up butchering it, what? Then you would say that they divide it proportionally according to the money that they put in? Well, that works for the Resha if it was by itself, but look at the continuation. Adetane sefa, lakach ze b'shelo v'ze b'shelo v'nit arebu, ze notel lefi ma'otav v'ze notel lefi ma'otav. The second half of the Tosefta says, if these two partners originally went into business individually, one bought 100 worth of whatever, and another bought 200 worth of oxen or whatever, and they were separate, and then they decided, okay, we'll partner up. In that case, when they come to split the profits, they do it proportionally because they came in separately. So then, surely they would, and they have different shares. So surely, when they split it, they do it because that shows that they could have done it individually. It's not like when they each buy one big thing and they need each other. They don't need each other. They went into business separately. So then they get proportionally. So that's the sefa. Now, according to you, your explanation, Rabbah, of this baraita, that it was only talking about of an ox that was bought for plowing and used for plowing. If you want to show a contrast between two cases, show a contrast between the cases that are most similar, and say, when do we say we divide equally? Only if it's an ox that was bought and used for plowing. But if you bought it for plowing and then you slaughter it, then you go by proportionally by how much they invested. And that would be a closer distinction, so you could see the exact principle rather than coming up with an entirely new case of where they were not partners at first. So we answer for Rabbah, hachinami kamad. In fact, we can explain this Tosefta as saying that. But when is it true that they split evenly? When it was bought and used for plowing. But if it was bought for plowing and then they ended up slaughtering it, that would be the same as a case where they had each invested in a business separately and then joined together, and that in both of those cases, and then they take out proportionally according to the investment that they put in. Good, so we answered the question to Rabbah. Last question here is going to be against Shemuel, who said that in business partners split evenly. Wait a second, that goes against our Mishnah. I proposed before that maybe Shemuel is following the Biuda Nasi. On the other hand, Shemuel is also the one that gives that Okimta to explain Rabbi Natan in our Mishnah, which sounds like he does agree with it. And so how could Shemuel say that in case of investments they split evenly? So Tanan v'chen shelosha she'etilu lakis pachatu o hotiru kach hen cholkin, when the Mishnah says that when three people are partners together, whether they have loss or profit, they split it in the same manner as the three women above. So my love pachatu mamash, hotiru mamash. So it doesn't mean that then a loss means there was an actual loss, that whatever they invested into, then they bought oxen with it, and the oxen got scrawny and died. Or if they hotiru means they bought oxen and then they got fat and they got a profit. Isn't that what it's talking about? And yet it says they split according to we call it the game theory principle, and not evenly. So Shemuel, what are you going to do with that? Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba bar Abu, lo hotiru zuze hadate, pachatu astera desunita. No, when it says loss and profit, we're not talking about loss and profit of what they invested, but rather the actual coins that they put into it. If there's coins that they have left over, everybody put in money, and there's still coins around, and they bought and sold and things, but then whatever cash is available, that they take out their original amount of investment from the cash proportionally to what they put in, right? So let's say they all invested and then they ended up not actually going into business and not buying anything. They want to get their original cash back. One gets 100, 200, and 300. And the same would be true if they do buy and sell, and now they have different actual coins than the original ones. So those coins are all on the table. They get to split them according to the game theory principle. And in that case, coins are not all worth the same amount, even if they all have the same denomination and stamp on them, because if they put in old worn out coins and then they go and trade with them and they get in exchange new nice coins, so those coins are actually, even though it says $1 on it, it's actually worth more, and so they would split those according to game theory. And similarly, if they had a loss, pachatu, that it could only be used for a wound. Sometimes a coin would be so debased, people would scratch off a little, take a little of the silver or the gold, tiny bit, until in the end, the government says this is not worth anything. And the only thing that you could use it for is to put on your foot to cover a wound so that you could walk on it. So if there's a loss in the coins, then also the loss is split according to game theory. So that's what the Shmuel can explain. The Mishnah is talking about that, but the actual profit and loss of their investments, that gets split evenly. All right, next Mishnah. Mishaya nasui arba nashim umet. So we went from a man married to 2 women to 3 women, and now we go to 4 women. What we're going to see is actually it doesn't really matter in this case that it's 4 women. We can express the principle equally if there was only 3 or 2. But the Mishnah, just for stylistic reasons, as it goes to the next case, adds one more just so that you remember it. Oh yeah, the case of 2, the case of 3, the case of 4. Okay, so here's how it works. He died. Harishona, and he owes, the estate owes all of them a ketubah. There's limited funds. Harishona kodemet lasheniya. In this case, as opposed to the Mishnah we just had, they sign the ketubot on different dates. So in the Mishnah we just had, they all sign the ketubah on the same day and time. That's why they have to figure out how to split it. But if one was earlier, one was in year 1, and then every year he married another wife, and so the first one will get paid first, and no matter how much it is, she gets all the money, and if there's anything left over, the second one can get paid. Ushniya l'shilishi gets paid before the third, Shlishit l'rabi'it, and the third gets paid before the fourth. Verishona nishpat l'sheniya. Now the first one, before she gets paid, she has to swear to the second that she's owed that full amount. If it was let's say they're all have to get 1,000. So the first one, I'll make it simple, 200, if they're a bit too low. So if they, the first one says, listen, I swear I didn't get paid anything yet of my 200, so I'm going to collect the whole 200. Ushna l'shilishit, and the second one will also swear to the third one. She has to say, hey, I didn't get anything, because if she already received some payout and now she doesn't deserve the full 200, she's taking away, possibly taking away from the third wife, because if there's limited funds, so maybe only enough for the second and not enough for the third, so the second has to swear to the third. And so too, the third has to swear to the fourth. But the fourth, if there's still funds left over, she gets paid without making a swear, because she's not taking it from anyone else. After all first 3 got paid already. That's Tanakama. Ben-Anas omer v'chi mipnei she'hi acharona niskeret. Ben-Anas said, wait, that's fair. Just because she's last, she should have an advantage that she doesn't have to swear. Afi lo titpara ela bishvoa. She also should have to swear. After all, who are they all collecting from? Right? Their husband died, so the estate went to the orphans, and anytime you're extracting money from orphans, you have to swear. And so even the fourth one has to swear. If indeed she got paid something beforehand, then she shouldn't be allowed to take it from the orphan. So she also would be incurring a loss, not on the other wives, but on the orphans. So therefore, according to Ben-Anas, they all have to swear. Hayu yoseot kulam beyom ehad. However, if all of the ketubot had the same day on it, he married all 4 on the same day. Then we have to look at the hour. And sometimes they would write the hour of the ketubah. It was at 6 in the morning. Another one 7 in the morning, 8 in the morning, 9 in the morning. And so whichever one is earlier has the earlier lien, and therefore gets paid first. And in fact, in Jerusalem, they would make sure to write the hour on it, because just in case he married one woman in the morning, one in the afternoon. Hayu kulan yosot b'sha'achat ve'en sham ela maneh Cholkot beshaveh. However, if they all have the exact same date on it, and there's only 100 dinars to pay all of them, then they divide everything equally. This last line is consistent both with Rabbi or Rabbi Natan, Rabbi who says you always split evenly, and Rabbi Natan also in the previous Mishnah, because if there's only 100 in the estate, then that's less than the minimum possible ketuvah for anyone, and therefore nobody would be paid in full, and they would split evenly like the first case. So when there's only 100 and each get 33 and a quarter, so same would be if there's 4 wives, then each would get 25, and that would be true according to any principle of division, whether it be or to be Natan. So we can't tell from here which opinion this Mishnah follows. So that's the Mishnah, and we'll see the Gemara on the next stuff. Baruch Adonai L'olam. Amen ve'amen.